Please welcome David Rubenstein, President of the Economic Club of Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our 13th virtual signature event of our 35th season. I will talk about a number of subjects, including the recent attacks on the U.S. Capitol, current political environment, potential reforms to security measures, and the way forward to national unity. The two members that we have, and we're very honored that they're joining us today, are Debbie Dingell, representing the 12th District of Michigan. She's a Democrat, and Tom Reed, representing the 23rd District of New York. He is a Republican. So let me get on with our discussions now, and let me introduce our two members more formally. Debbie Dingell is well known in Washington because she was in Washington for many years, a native of Michigan, but she was in Washington many years heading up the General Motors Foundation and doing work for General Motors. She was first elected to the Congress, I'd say in 2014, she was elected to Congress and has now been serving since that time as a member of Congress from Michigan. She is an active member of the Democratic Party, and she has, as her most important accomplishment, she was a member of our board before she joined the Congress. And I want to thank you very much, Debbie, for joining us and giving us your insights. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, and I'd also like to, Tom Reed. Tom Reed is a member of the House. He is elected first in 2010. He is a person who was a graduate of Alfred University, where he was an All-American swimmer, and a graduate of Ohio Northern Law School. In his bio, it pointed out something to me that I had not known. He's the youngest of 12 children and was raised by a single mother. His father, a military hero, passed away when he was only 2 years old. And so welcome, Tom, and welcome, Debbie. So let me just kick off at the beginning and ask both of you, what do you think, what was going through your head during the time of the invasion of Congress? Did you know what was going on? Did you think it would be as bad as it turned out to be? Where were you when you first were told something is happening? Debbie, where were you?
Well, I was actually on the House floor when it began, and I began to notice some of our security was becoming a bit intense. You could hear noise, but I really did not realize that anything was out of the ordinary. We knew that there were going to be protesters that day. Then suddenly I saw Steny and the speaker taken off of the floor, but yet candidly at the same time, staff had come up to me and said, we need you to help people calm. Will you go to the mic and we'll tell you what we need to say? We need you and Jim McGovern to keep the process going. We want to keep things normal. Shortly after that, they came in, told us to sit in our seats, to take out our escape hoods, to be ready to get on the floor very quickly. You could hear people pounding at the door. Many of the members, Republicans and Democrats, there weren't Republicans or Democrats in that room that day, helped law enforcement try to barricade the doors. But I still felt like we were safe inside the chamber. And then you began to hear glass breaking. We were evacuated. We heard the gunshot, which unfortunately resulted in the death of someone, and we were taken to an undisclosed location and there for several hours. But, you know, David, I've become used to this in a way, not used to the insurrection we have seen. But if you've ever been the target of a Donald Trump, I was with Tom when one of the worst ones happened. You don't understand what it's like. I've been in this hate tunnel for a couple of years where I've had the militia in front of my house, where my antenna is always up. And I always feel like I'll survive it. You know, they're trying to make my life uncomfortable. I don't think any of us really realized how serious it was, what the threats were, that they wanted to kidnap us or kill us until it was over and we began to see the aftermath.
Tom, you were on the House floor as well. What did you think was going on when you heard the noise?
Well, actually, David, I just left the House floor about 15 minutes before this all went down, and I always put my office outside. And so I was walking outside, as I always do. And so I was outside when the mob was coming up around the side of the Capitol. And that at that point in time, they locked the buildings down. So I was essentially locked outside. And you knew it was different. You know, you knew this wasn't just a protest. You knew that this was something that needed to, that we were not expecting that day. We were obviously prepared for the protesters, but this was going to be a different situation. But I worked my way into Longworth, showed my ID, got back into my office. That's where they secured us for the duration of that event. And I will just tell you, I watched on TV. I was texting my colleagues. My best friend in Congress is Josh Gottheimer, Democratic member, co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus that both Debbie and I are a part of. I founded 4 years ago with Josh to try to break and bring this country back together. And you know, we checked in on each other, found out that we were safe. And I just watched on TV and I had tears in my eyes. I mean, it was something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And I was disheartened. But I also left that evening when we went back to the floor in the chamber and completed democracy by completing the task at hand. And there was a lot of folks that wanted us to go off-site. I wanted to complete the process, not in the chambers, in the Senate and the House. And to the credit of both Democrats and Republicans that day, they said, no, we're going back to the chamber. We're going to not let the mob win. And I went across the aisle to stand with Josh, gave a speech that I spoke from the heart on 5 minutes notice and just said, you know what, I'm a proud Republican. I know Josh and Debbie are proud Democrats, but we're going to stand together as Americans and not let the mob win. And we're going to go forward and we're going to continue these disagreements, but we're going to do it not through violence, but we're going to do it by leading the country and letting the ballot box determine our future leaderships. And so glad to see us complete it. And I was energized. And to the point that Debbie made, you know, right now our country's broken. I have death threats. I had a death threat here in October with a brick and a dead rat left at my front stoop that my wife uncovered with the names of my children that were left from Democratic Socialists on the left that we are now going to be hopefully arresting here very shortly because of this event. They came out and got emboldened and are chattering on websites. So the bottom line is extremism is not the future of America. And I think leadership is going to see us through. And I'm just glad that hopefully we can move through this. And I stood at the inauguration and I sat with members on both sides of the aisle to just say, you know what, it's time to move on. It's time to move forward. And it's time for us to unite as a country.
Okay, so Debbie and Tom, I'll ask you, Debbie, first. In hindsight, was it the fault to some extent of the Congressional Capitol Police or the Sergeant of Arms for not having more security, or the National Guard, or who do you think failed to provide the adequate security? And I'm also curious if you have all thought about that, if those who invaded the Capitol were more, let's say, professional in terms of their abilities to harm people, that an enormous amount of death could have occurred.
So I am someone, David, that believes very strongly we need an independent panel to be looking at what happened. Anybody who has, you know, if you come from Michigan, which has been living with this, we have a governor that they tried to kidnap and potentially hang, knows what some of these groups are capable of. And were there people, and I don't know who the people were, that did not want to have a military presence on the Hill that day. The National Guard should have been stationed at a place. No, there was no way that this crowd was not going to get out of control. I mean, I don't know how to go on the dark web, but even I, knowing, reading my social media, reading what I was reading in the newspaper, knew that this was going to be a difficult day. I have asked a lot of questions, and every time I get ask a question, someone gives me a different answer or points a finger a different way. I think we need to, and I think that there's a problem that there are not clear responsible lines for who is responsible for security on Capitol Hill. I think I want to say this carefully, I think it's become political in the sense that people are very respectful of members and they don't want to do anything to offend them. Well, I think we all need to be treated the same. You know, we got a guest, the guest goes through security. I don't mind going through security. I should be living through the same rules that everybody else is. This is a very serious national security issue, and we need to make this a professional from top to bottom operation.
Okay. Tom, what is your view? Who was at fault in terms of providing security? And do you think there should be a commission, or what will be done to look at how you can improve the security?
Well, obviously, I agree with Debbie. In an independent commission, we can always learn from these events. But the tension that we always face on the Hill is, remember, this is the people's house. And when people come to the Capitol, what we pride ourselves in is we've gone through 1993 bombings, as we've gone through 9/11, as we see the ratcheting up of security. It's always on the backdrop of, remember, we are a free and democratic country, and the Capitol represents that wholeheartedly. And that's where we wrestle with this. And I know, talking to Capitol Police, talking to law enforcement that guard us and guard the Capitol, you wrestle with that mission that they're under. Is like, we want to keep that openness. As we walk through the Capitol and you see the speaker walk through the halls, you see the elected officials walking through the halls. It's a functioning democracy that the people can you never know who you're going to see there. And so you got to wrestle that need for security with that freedom that is represented by the Capitol. And I think with that independent commission, we can find that how we can do it better, how we can make sure that this event never happens again. But I will tell you, the law enforcement at the men and women of the Capitol Police, I applaud them. They, thank God, some members were like, they should have opened up. They should have knocked all these people down. They should have opened up their weapons and things like that. But think about what that image would have represented. The imagery across the world was so bad as to what happened if you had a few thousand dead Americans that would be. We are the leaders of the world of democracy. Yeah, you have to keep that in perspective as to what that would have represented to the world. And so thank God there was not more death. We're going to learn from it. We're going to secure the Capitol. But I think we can do this in a way that recognizes we need to be that beacon of hope and democracy going forward. Secure the Capitol, but at the same time, make sure it's still free and it is not a lockdown situation that we see across the world that people tend to run to because of the need for security.
I'm sorry,
can I
Debbie,
just
go ahead.
say one thing? That Tom's really right about that. And one of the things that I want to say is, I didn't see any of the television clips until after we finished at 4 a.m. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, that person did this or that person didn't let in. We would not be here today. People like Tom and I, if it were not for the men and women's courage that day at the United States Capitol. Clips are taken out of context. They're not understood. They defended the Capitol. And I'm very grateful to the law enforcement that kept so many people safe that day.
And to follow up on that, because there's been like clips of, law enforcement opening up the bicycle gates and things like that. And they're in conspiracy with these folks and things. Those were tactical decisions. And if you watch the law enforcement, Capitol Police, they went to a position of higher tactical position to control the mob. They were controlling some of these folks, these people that were being escorted, elderly people, to take them away from the mob that was behind them, to put them to move to places of safety. So each one of these actions, be very careful to judge what you see in a picture. We got to make sure we give law enforcement the ability to explain exactly what they were doing in each one of those moments, because the men and women of the Capitol Police, they were trying to do the best they could with the situation at hand. And it was a dire situation that got out of hand real quick.
Okay, so after it occurred, there was a vote subsequently in the House to impeach the President of the United States. Debbie, I think every Democrat supported that. And did you think at the time that any Republicans would support that? And was it, did you get a lot of feedback from your district about whether you should support that or not?
Actually, Tom and I were part of a group of friends and colleagues that had a lot of discussions about what was the right thing to do and how should one proceed. In the end, I think that all the Democrats did vote for it. I raised issues. I do believe that President Trump needed to be held accountable, but I have for years talked about the fear and the hatred that's dividing this country. And I think it's very important that even as we go forward now, that we not contribute further to the division in this country. I think as more and more videotapes came out and people saw some of the actions, people began to feel stronger about it. And, as Tom was saying, there are people with very, very, very strong feelings on both sides of this issue. And a lot of the members are hearing from people on both sides.
And Tom, you voted against impeaching the president, and your reasoning was what?
So, I did a New York Times op-ed on this, and where I looked at it, impeachment is a constitutional tool that you really have to look at the full picture. You have to look at the constitutional impacts. And what I saw was a snap impeachment. What I saw was people demanding an emotional response given the events of January 6th. And I understand that. But when I looked at impeachment and I looked at the due process rights that needed to be included there, when I saw that the president was leaving on January 20th, where I saw what that would do to further divide the country, what I saw with the issues of constitutional free speech that needed to be debated in the country that occurred on the Mall, even though I saw some issues that caused me great concern, and I came out in support of censure of President Trump in regards to the activity that occurred on the Mall that day in the speech that I watched and I witnessed myself. And so I recognize the accountability, and that's why I thought censure was a more measured and appropriate immediate response to respond to the situation. And remember, censure is not a slap on the wrist. Censure is a historic. We've only censured one president officially from Congress to the president. And so it's not like it's a non-existent penalty. It's a historic penalty. And so I got a lot of heat from my party in regards to the position on that. But I was really concerned about why pursuing impeachment that quick with that many days left in the administration. And remember, impeachment's about overturning the will of an election. And so the votes that were cast in 2016, that was an election that was put President Trump in place. And if you're going to overturn that election, you still got to take all the consideration of impeachment into effect. And so I just was against impeachment for all those reasons. And I just think, this impeachment in the Senate is going to further divide this nation, and it is going to play into this gasoline that the 74 million folks of America that voted for President Trump that do not believe, many of them do not believe this election was legitimate. I had no problem recognizing at this point in time that President Biden is our president, but there are millions of Americans, and not just because President Trump says it, but they do believe it. I can tell you I've heard from it, and we have to heal this nation, and we have to listen to that frustration and anger of those 74 million people and make sure that their concerns about the election and others are heard, David.
If there is no conviction in the Senate, and it looks like it may be difficult to get a conviction in the Senate, do you think either house will pass a censure, or that will be the end of this whole matter with respect to President Trump? Tom, do you expect there would be a censure approval in the House later?
My hope is that we move forward. And I take President Biden at his inauguration speech of trying to unite this country. And I think President Biden has an opportunity to heal the nation. And that would be, I hope, the road that he takes, and forgiveness is part of bringing the country together and moves forward. And further picking at this division, I think is not going to serve anyone well. But we'll see. And that's something that the political offices, they'll want to divide this possibly, and hopefully their voice doesn't win and we just move forward for the sake of the country.
Okay, so Debbie, let me ask you, let's go forward and talk about legislation. The president has proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. And do you think that the Democrats in the House will support that bill pretty much the way he wants it? Or do you think there'll be a lot of give and take and he will not be able to get all of what he wants, or even most of it?
I think that the general outlines of the bill that President Biden wants will be there. We are already in discussions with Tom and others trying to find a way that we can all agree and move it forward. I mean, they're very clearly what he is asking for. We all needs to happen. We have to increase the production of vaccines. We've got to increase the production of syringes and alcohol swabs. We have to do more COVID testing. We've got kids with student loans that need help, people who are in danger of being evicted from their homes, small businesses, restaurants. It's the same group of challenges that we faced since the beginning of the pandemic. But yet when the president walked in, it was worse than he thought that it was. And we cannot rebuild our economy until we have a national COVID strategy and get it under control. So I'm hopeful that we can find bipartisan. I'm like the president. I am one of I think we need to unite. I'm tired of partisan bickering. I think a lot of people in America are tired of partisan bickering, and I think we need to figure out a way to get this done.
Tom, do you think that Republicans are likely to support President Biden's legislative agenda, at least what we've seen so far in the stimulus proposal, or that's unlikely?
Well, I mean, we're engaging in good faith, and I appreciate the White House reaching out to us, especially in the Problem Solvers Caucus, the 56 number group, and with a slim majority in the House and the 50-50 split in the Senate, our group is, I think, going to be critical, and I appreciate Debbie she's part of that group, and we're really trying to get to yes, because if the president succeeds, we all succeed in America. And so hopefully we can get there. And there are things that we can agree to, I think, readily, easily. COVID vaccine, COVID distribution money, that should be able to get people together. That could pass maybe on its own on suspension in the House and Senate and get taken care of. But when you talk about $900 billion that we just got signed into law, that we in the Problem Solvers Caucus, working with our group in the Senate, that Common Sense Coalition, 16 members in the Senate, got to the president's desk and signed into law, we still are seeing the impacts of that $900 billion. So there is, I think, in the conversations I've had, bipartisan concern. Well, let's see, this isn't monopoly money. Let's see where the money's at. Let's see what's going on with the economy. Let's see where the status of the virus is. So maybe a little bit down the road, what is needed out of the 1.9 trillion, we can come to common ground on it. There are things like eviction moratorium, for example, taking care of that liability that's accrued. We're going to have to deal with that issue. State and local aid with the liability reforms, because you're starting to see property casualty carriers starting to disclaim defense coverage as well as the indemnification liabilities. That's starting to stack up. So you're going to get individuals and businesses losing defense coverage. So these issues are going to ripen as we go forward. But I think we're in the position to be reasonable, good faith members and good faith partners to see what we can do to come to an agreement on that 1.9 trillion.
Who do you regard as the leader of the Republican Party now? Since you don't control the House or the Senate, and the White House is controlled by the Democrats as well. So is there a leader of the Republican Party, or is it still, you could say, President Trump, or nobody is the leader?
Well, that's a great question. And right now, who gave me a great amount of leadership inspiration through January 6th and elsewhere, I will tell you, Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence did what I think was needed in that period of time. They looked to the Constitution. They stood for the Constitution. And I think they gained a lot of respect by a lot of members. And I will tell you, Mike Pence in particular, who I served with, I think is raising in ranks. Keep an eye on Mike Pence as a leader of the Republican Party. And I will tell you, President Trump is not gone from Republican leadership in regards to, he's got a tremendous amount of influence and a tremendous amount of folks. But if you think of the Trump leadership effect of the folks that went to the floor of the House and Senate, those folks are going to be purged from the Republican Party, and rightfully so. So if that's the Trump leadership that you're referring to, I don't think that's going to be part of the Republican Party in the future.
Debbie, for the last 4 years, the Democrats in the House more or less were the leaders of the Democratic Party, and they were, to some extent, you could say, in opposition to what was going on from the White House. But now you have a Democratic president. Is it hard to adjust to having to listen to somebody at the White House or in the cabinet offices when they're your own party, and you can't just say, this is what the Democrats stand for because we are the Democrats in the House? How do you adjust to the way you operate when you have a Democratic president?
Well, no matter what party you've been in, that's always a challenge. And both parties have found very commonly after they take the White House, what happens to the United States House of Representatives in 2 years is that they frequently lose it. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. I think that those who don't study history are bound to repeat it, and you have a lot of people who do not want to repeat modern history. And you also are dealing with people who know each other. One of the things I want to say about the team of people, not the younger, newer members that have been coming in, but leadership is a seasoned group of people. They have relationships. That's one of the things we've lost in politics, and one of the problems. We don't have relationships. People don't trust each other. That's how a lot of things used to get done. You could totally disagree on an issue, but you go have a drink at night and you talk, or you play paddleball in the gym, or you have relationships. The good thing I think right now for Democrats is this leadership has known each other for a long time. They trust each other. They know when they want to, maybe go after somebody, but I think they're going to work together, and we're trying to help the newer members understand and see that as well, and have a voice, be at the table.
So Debbie, you've been in the House for a number of years now, but you were in the private sector for a while. What is the pleasure of being in the House when people criticize you all the time? You have to go back every weekend to your district. People are threatening you with things. Is it job as much fun as you thought it was going to be? And you sometimes say, hey, maybe this isn't worth the aggravation factor?
So I would lie I would be totally lying if I didn't say that there are days that I wonder. I quite frankly wonder some days if I was more effective in the private sector than I am in the public sector. Except, you know what's happened in this country, David? We started to demonize the public sector, and we need the public sector. Our government is as strong as the people that are willing to serve in it and to fight for it. I've made great friends. One of the things about being seasoned, I say, Tom will tell you, I'm always in trouble. I say what I think. And there are not enough people that say what needs to be said in a room and then just say it as it is. And I love this country, and this country is worth fighting for. And I won't use the word I want to use if I'm going to let people attack our democracy or hurt it in any way.
Okay, Tom, what's the pleasure of being in the minority in the House of Representatives? You could argue being in the majority is not that pleasurable, but being in the minority is really unpopular or not that pleasurable, I assume. So what is the pleasure you get out of being a member of the House of Representatives, going back to your district, getting all the vilification, and also being in the minority? What's the pleasure of that? Plus the high compensation you get.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, being part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, where I think we changed the rules of the House, for example, last Congress, using our relationships that are deep in regards to the relationships I have with guys like Josh Gottheimer, who's my best friend in Congress on the Democratic side. You know, using those opportunities to get things done and signed into law has been very rewarding. But I still, and as I said on the floor before, I love the institution of the United States Congress. I got mentors like John Boehner, Bob Michaels, God rest his soul, Amo Houghton, God rest his soul, who mentored me. And they said early on, you know, identify some people across the aisle that are good people and become good friends with them. And guys like Jimmy Panetta, Tom Suozzi, folks that serve on Ways and Means with me, you get to know these people. And I will tell you, it still reminds me that in Congress, there are honorable men and women, people like Debbie, who come to the table in good faith and are committed to the country and love the institution. And the institution is filled with those folks. Now, what you see on cable TV, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of division, there's a lot of polarization, and there's a lot of people on cable TV that are just looking for their 5 minutes of fame. I don't associate with those people on a regular basis. I associate myself with good people like Debbie and Josh, and just try to get things done for the sake of the institution and the country.
You know, David, I want to say something really fast. We think of Congress like this, you know, the Washington side of it, You don't know the good we do back home, the people that we serve, the difference that you can make in people's lives working with. I mean, I got a steel plant taken down that sat idle for 25 years. The waters that we've gotten cleaned up, worked with Tom on in the Great Lakes, the casework that we do, the people that are desperate on COVID. That's why we do it. We do it to help the people that are counting on us, and we can make a difference for.
Okay, so let me ask you, Debbie, in your case, you think that Congress will have as its highest priority the stimulus bill, but after the stimulus bill, what do you think the House of Representatives is most likely to focus its attention on?
I think the next bill that you're going to see is going to be what the White House, I think, is going to want to do too, is an infrastructure bill. We've needed one for a very long time, and it will be a broad infrastructure bill. Not only, I'll quote my governor, will it fix the damn roads, excuse my language, but that is her slang, and bridges, but we need broadband. I mean, COVID has just shined a light on the disparity of broadband in urban and rural areas. We need to fix our broken pipes and infrastructure. For the environment, we got to build out an electric vehicle infrastructure. There are many, we have to rebuild our schools. I think that infrastructure bill will most likely be the next big bill out. I don't know what you think, Tom.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's crying out for us to demonstrate to the country that we can work together, and an infrastructure bill, at least $1 trillion bill. I went on national TV, and I'm not supposed to do this as an elected official, but I said $1 trillion infrastructure bill. There is broad bipartisan support, not only what we need to do, but financing it, doing it with 0% essentially interest rates out there. Now is the time to seize the moment. Learn a lesson from Republicans. We led with healthcare when President Trump came in. Wrong path to take. Infrastructure heals the wounds, brings the country together, and the roadmap is already there. We've already, in the Problem Solvers Caucus, laid it out. Bipartisan support for what needs to be done, and the money can be there. And the country needs that fiscal stimulus too, in my opinion, and we're ready to do it.
Pay for some of the stimulus and other things. Some people advocate increasing taxes. You're on the Ways and Means Committee. Do you expect a tax increase this year or next, Tom?
Well, I think, there's an appetite on the left for, the fair share argument and raising revenue. So I think that's going to be part of the conversation. The gas tax, I still don't see a gas tax increase in the horizon. Maybe an inflationary raise there. That could be something maybe that gets folks together. But there's other revenue increases that are out there. But the financing of it, debt financing plus some additional new revenue. And then also you got to think infrastructure over the horizon. As we go to wireless cars, VMT, vehicle miles traveled, the whole electronic vehicle, how you're going to do a user fee based on that model. There's some legitimate conversations going on how to take care of that revenue that could be included in the conversation.
Final question for you, Tom. You are the youngest of 12 children. What is it like to grow up with 11 siblings? I had none. And how many nieces and nephews do you have now? And can you remember their names?
I am not going to hazard a guess to know all their name, and they keep popping the nieces and nephews. So it's tough to keep track of that number. But, I guess it's a little bit like being in Congress. I guess that's what served me well is Mom always told us, when you guys fight and we have family fights, it's just like in Congress right now. It's just you kids figure it out and get the job done. And so how we always got together was, we always loved each other. We fought, but we always loved each other at the end of the day. And that's what made us work. And you never knew any different. I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a happy household.
Okay, Debbie, final question for you. Right now, the Congress is in sort of a lockdown, so visitors cannot come in. How can the Congress survive without lobbyists coming up, being in Capitol Hill? How are you able to pass legislation without lobbyists coming around and lobbying?
I don't want to insult the members of the Washington Economic Club, but it's been kind of nice and quiet. But the fact of the matter is that when we're working on bills, we're talking. I don't think of lobbyists as evil. I think of them as sources of information, and we all study. We want to get all the background information. I miss seeing people. Everybody knows me. They know I'm at 18 events a day. I like to dig in. I am a person that digs in. So I miss seeing people on the Hill, but I want us to be safe on the Hill as well. So it's good to see everybody virtually, and I'm always available for a Zoom.
All right. Debbie and Tom, thank you very much for your time and your service to the country. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Debbie.